Welcome, everybody. Go ahead. I love that people are putting hellos and good afternoons in the chat. We'd love to hear where you're from and where you're joining us from. So please feel free to say hello. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us and for being here with us today, and especially for the excitement around this month's webinar featuring faculty who participated in our inaugural Culturally Responsive Curriculum Development Institute. I'm Judy Marquez-Kiyama, Associate Vice Provost for Faculty Development here at the University of Arizona. And I'm so excited to welcome you on behalf of Faculty Affairs and HSI initiatives. Today's session will dig even deeper into the ways in which we as an HSI work to integrate notions of servingness into classroom teaching and learning. And when we talk about servingness, for those of you who have joined us before, we reference Dr. Gina Garcia's work, and she captures the ways in which faculty and staff engage in efforts to honor the cultures and the lived experiences of Latino, Latina, Latinx students, Black and Indigenous students, and underrepresented students and communities. So we begin by respectfully acknowledging the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the Orem and the Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and Indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. And as I've shared before, the goals for our webinar series are threefold. By spotlighting current scholarship, and in this case, scholarship in the classroom, we offer examples of rich ways in which servingness is enacted by faculty and staff across the institution. We invite others, both on campus, nationally, regionally, to learn about and engage in these efforts, and we build knowledge together. We answer the question, what steps are needed to build institutional capacity around HSI servingness? I am so excited to be joined by three faculty who participated in the Culturally Responsive Curriculum Development Institute in June. Our first panelist is Dr. Tarnia Newton, who is an assistant clinical professor in the College of Nursing. As a family nurse practitioner, Dr. Newton has experience in family practice, urgent care, bioidentical hormone therapy, enhanced external counterpulsation therapies, post-acute and long-term care. Dr. Newton has a deep-rooted interest in improving outcomes in patients with chronic disease and empowering healthcare teams to provide patient-centered care, utilizing the Institute for Healthcare Improvement Model Framework to accelerate transformative change. And then we have Dr. Hester Oberman, who is a lecturer in religious studies and classics within the College of Humanities. Dr. Oberman's research focuses on the intersection between spiritual and religious experiences and observable scientific data. Her recent research includes religion and violence, the psychology of spirituality, the nature of belief in the 21st century, and the influence of faith traditions in spirituality and healthcare and medicine. And finally, we have our third panelist, Dr. Na Zhao, who is an assistant professor of practice in agricultural economics and agribusiness within the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. Her research examines issues of natural resource development with a focus on interaction between fossil fuel extraction and community development. She also studies instructional pedagogies, including collaborative learning and inclusive teaching. So please help me welcome our panelists. We're so excited to engage with all three of you in discussion today. But one thing that we thought we would do before moving into our panel discussion is actually share with everyone a little bit about the Culturally Responsive Curriculum Development Institute, how it came to be, and the frameworks that we're drawing from when thinking through this work. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more time and just talk through a few slides that give you all background and some context about the Institute. So again, drawing on Dr. Gina Garcia's work, we have a real opportunity as an HSI to think about how we integrate servingness into curriculum and pedagogy. And specifically, Dr. Garcia talks about the ways in which Hispanic and Latinx enhancing organizations can enact this social justice curriculum in culturally relevant programs and services and practice, and really pushes us when we think about servingness to ground that work in justice and equity as a way to really integrate practices and reframing those practices at HSIs. And so it's with that kind of conceptual framework in mind that we approached this culturally responsive curriculum development institute. The other thing that informed creating this institute and launching it last summer is that we were hearing from faculty that they wanted to engage more deeply with culturally responsive pedagogies, inclusive practices, culturally responsive frameworks, and often didn't have the time, the space, the resources to do it. And so we were able to set aside a full week in June, where faculty came together with the purpose of redesigning one course. We asked them to choose one course that they would teach in the following year. And we worked through multiple kind of frameworks, practices, opportunities around culturally responsiveness in the classroom. And I'll share a bit more about each of the sessions that we went through. So we were responding to an ask and a need on our own campus. We were also hearing nationally, and Dr. Marla Franco has shared this quite a bit, is that this is a larger conversation that's happening on the national level around what HSIs can do, what faculty and instructors can do to integrate this work into the classroom. And so we were also wanting to be sure that we were cognizant of needs and conversations that were happening across HSIs across the country. So when we talk about culturally responsive work, it's really been an evolution, a humanizing evolution that is led by Gloria Ladson-Billings, right, who has done so much work at the K-12 level, first kind of coining it from a culturally relevant lens, which really was about validating students' knowledge in the classroom, validating their backgrounds, their home experiences, their cultural experiences, integrating their prior knowledge into the curriculum. And there's been, of course, with every framework, evolutions and critique, and some have said, okay, validation is not enough. What do we do to really move that forward to not only incorporate students' cultural knowledge and integrate their cultural backgrounds, but really push and move towards this place, as she calls it, to a place of social, political, and critical consciousness. So she is suggesting with culturally responsive pedagogies that we can move into places where it is tied to students' academic learning and academic success, and at the same time going deeper into socio-political and critical consciousness with the communities around them, with the context around them, while still building on their cultural knowledges in classroom practice. When we move then towards culturally sustaining work, and this is Sammy Alim, Django Paris's work, and again, Gloria Ladson-Billings has built upon this as well. We're really talking about integrating the prior pieces that I just mentioned, but also sustaining those, sustaining these linguistic literacy, culturally pluralism, culturally inherited ways of knowing and being and navigating the world, not only in the classroom, but as they move into sociocultural situations, moving ultimately towards social transformation and liberation. And so that's, as we think about the movement and the evolution of these frameworks, those are some of the theoretical pieces that we're pulling from as we inform practice and then teaching and learning in the classroom. So what did the Institute, what made up our Institute? We had, of course, because we are doing much of it virtually, we had 22 faculty go through our pilot program. They joined us, as I mentioned, for an entire week. We had 11 colleges represented across the university and 22 courses redesigned. These courses ranged from large 500-person courses to smaller seminar courses to internship and practicum courses. So at the range, it ranged also from undergraduate courses to graduate courses, really with the goals that the faculty themselves set around how they wanted to redesign that course that they were set to teach for the next academic year. We moved through various forms of modalities. We talked about different ways in which to enact this work. And in the process, modeled it with one another so that we were also building community in that space. And I think that was one of the immediate kind of outcomes that I saw, was that we were able to cultivate a space of support for one another, and then come back and revisit that space throughout the year and talk through ideas and questions with one another. In total, when we looked through course enrollment for the classes that were redesigned, over 2,200 students have been served just by these courses alone. And then what you'll hear from the faculty today are the ways in which they are taking some of these strategies into other courses and other spaces. So we know the impact can be even greater. I do want to mention that faculty were offered a stipend, a $1,000 stipend, for participating in the Institute and committing to redesigning their courses. Our 3 learning outcomes focused on increasing knowledge of culturally responsive frameworks and content, enacting culturally responsive frameworks and content into teaching practice, and then applying those frameworks to content redesign, course syllabi, assignments, and course assessment practices. And we did that by moving through the following sessions. We talked about what this means to be an HSI and the connection to our HSI designation. We talked about evidence-based design for learning, culturally responsive and inclusive pedagogies, land pedagogy, which connected us again to the 22 tribal communities within the state, the role of affect and feeling on pedagogy, some really specifics of what that looked like in the classroom, like what does it mean in terms of name pronunciation for students, use of testimonials in the classroom, and then inclusive assessment, and all the while trying to make sure that it was in alignment and tying back to the university's general education redesign. So it was a lot to pack into a week, and you'll hear much more from the incredible folks here today. I'm happy to answer more specific questions about the Institute itself. The new applications will launch next month, with mid-June being the expected dates for our June 2022 Institute. And I can share more about that as well. But for now, I will stop sharing my screen. And we want to go ahead and pose a few questions to our panelists and just hear from them about what they've done, what their experience was, what went well, and what they are still working on, because of course we know all of this is a continuous work in progress. So first question for all of you, I'll just open it up. What drew you to participate in the Institute, and what class did you choose to revise, and why? And so Tanya, let's go ahead and start with you.
Okay, so one of the reasons why I decided to do this course was because when we think of nursing and treating patients holistically, it's really teaching our students that as well. And so one of the courses that my intent would have been a clinical course, which is 620A, which is primary care. And the reason being why it was that course, it's the first course for nurse practitioners, and really being able to initiate that for nursing students or nurse practitioner students so that they're able to have cultural humility, but be able to have that cultural lens as a faculty to be able to take everything in as well. And more so that truly with also, when I think of service engagement, all of that plays a role when I think of that.
Thank you, Hester. We'll go to you.
Let me find the button. Thank you very much, Judy and Tanya. It's an honor to go after you and now to be with you on a panel. I come from interdisciplinary studies between the College of Humanities and Sciences. So I've been looking for a long time for a paradigm shift, a new model of higher education. I think that higher education coming from Europe, where I'm from, you know, pouring knowledge into somebody's head while they sit on uncomfortable benches somewhere in cold rooms is passé, is outdated, and we need new knowledge. And I think Judy and the Hispanic Serving Institution designation has really propelled, I think, our university forward. And I was attracted to the workshop more out of curiosity. I did not know. I was pretty ignorant, Judy, before I even said yes, but I knew I'm just looking, I need something. And that was really provided in this very intense week. You asked for one course. I threw this one course out of I did work on it, but it was for all my courses. It's a paradigm change. It's an approach to teaching that inherently changed me, and I will always be different. And the points that are different is this concept of embodiment, that you are teaching human beings that as active learning, you have to engage with them and be in co-partnership. It's not me telling them what to do. No, they tell me just as much. It's a co-creation, and I can say more later.
Yeah, I know I already have follow-up questions for both of you. So, but now we'll have you jump in as well.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. And it's a great pleasure to be here for and discuss this important topic. Now, this culture responsive pedagogy, I think being coming from a different culture, my home culture is in China, and coming here in the United States and start my career here. So culture is something that I have been navigating and true on kind of in my personal life. And in my classroom, I think the timing of this institute is really at least just a wake-up call for me, because that is a year, last summer is the year probably we are like 1 year into the pandemic. And also all of us are challenged not only by the pandemic, but also some brutal realities of social injustice. And all of us have been thinking about this. It's just put right in front of us. And for me, it really becomes clearer to me that the inclusiveness and culture responsive teaching environment should not sit in the back row of my course design, but it is critical to our underserved students and necessary for all the students. And then this institute came out. Another timing worked really well for me is that I'm among one of the faculty team in my home Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics, that we got this USDA NIFA grant to, it is a HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution grant, to support us develop our minor at our UA-Yuma campus. And then my course, I have 2 courses are included in this project. And the goal of this project is really to serve the students at UA-Yuma with the content that speak to them and speak to the community. So after a brief discussion with my department chair and all this, I feel like I got the full support, and I myself are very excited by the opportunity when I see the call. So that's the timing worked for me. So thank you.
Thank you all for sharing this. I mean, I'm drawn to the ways in which you all alluded to, but Hester, you named the paradigm shift that happens when you apply this and go through an intense institute like this, and then realize that it's not just about one class, right? It's about shifting how we approach our work with students. It's about shifting how we think about teaching and learning in collaboration with students. So I think that's just so powerful in terms of what you all shared around that piece. And Hester, I'm wondering, if you could talk a little bit more specifically about how you applied the content and the changes that you made. We noted in one of our debriefs, you talked about it being a risk, right? And that but there were some risks that really paid off for the students and for you. And how did it play out? We'd love to hear more.
Thank you. Yes. How did I apply it? It is a risk. You go out of your comfort zone, just standing behind your lectern and just reading your lecture, or, trying to lib it. But you really have to step out of your comfort zone into the classroom and meet the students on an equal basis, that they feel safe, they feel welcome, and that we're in this together. It is a kind of equalizing horizontalizing, if that's any English, of the classroom spaces where you are aware of your own biases and limitations, and where you can be totally enriched by the experiences of the students. We have students with so many different cultures, and older students with deep knowledge and traditions, traumas for vets coming back. I teach, of course, religion. You have religious trauma and religious experiences, and that in a scientific classroom and setting, academic classroom. So I already mentioned embodiment of the culturally responsive curriculum development is paramount. It really changes the paradigm. It's also active learning that really can only start when the student feels welcomed in the space and co-creator of the learning space. And it applies to servingness, that you are having, I love that word that you use of humility, humility that I don't know all, and I know a lot about maybe my very minor field, but these students will go on and kind of put, be the serving me and helping me in the future. They will be the professionals and the healthcare providers. So building trust and inviting the authentic self was essential, is essential. And how to do that? What I really learned, it's, the fashion you say is instead of fast food, it's slow food. Well, I think we have to go for slow teaching, especially at the beginning. Slow down, take time, create that human connection, and then exponentially you can speed up, and there can be an excitement and an exhilaration between teacher and student. So it's a journey, a collaborative journey of exploration.
I love it. I feel like I need to capture everything that you just said, because it's very poetic, and that you said in our marketing materials. No, I mean, it truly is. It is a journey. And I agree. Paula just put in the chat, slow teaching. Absolutely. I wonder, and this can be for any of the three of you, can you share some of the really specific things that you did, that you tried to shift, that you applied? This isn't one of the questions necessarily that we had prepped, but is there an example that you want to share with the audience of what that journey looked like as you were making those shifts, what those risks look like? How did it happen? And that's for any of the three of you.
I would just like to say, for me, I echo everything Esther said, is that it's been a journey. It's been a shift. It's putting on those new pairs of glasses, and yes, creating this amazing, co-creating that classroom with the student. But for me, I had implemented using the artifact, which was one of the activities that I learned from the Institute. And so it just so happened that I was in charge and making, let's say, the orientation process for these doctoral students. And so I decided for fellow faculty to use this and saying, okay, what we can do is we'll have the students bring an artifact as an icebreaker. But what I added to that was I wanted the students to bring an artifact that authentically represented themselves, right? And then I also wanted the students to bring an artifact where it gave them a feeling of resilience, so that they would be able to draw upon that feeling, look at that artifact, that when they were going through their doctoral program, they'll be able to draw upon it. And what was so interesting about this, many of my faculty said they really loved the activity, but really what was amazing is how, and it's interesting what Hester said, is that students want to be seen. They authentically want to present themselves. And when we think of the servingness and the populations that we want to serve, especially people from various cultures and socioeconomical backgrounds, it is important for them to authentically present themselves because it assists them to be better students. So that's just an example that I can think of, but I think it's just such a shift as when we're in the servingness and really being authentic. And I think authenticity plays such a crucial role when it comes to learning.
To just add a little bit more on that authenticity, I think that's really the point of co-creating this learning experience together with students. The institute really kind of pushed me to think about how much I'm feeling comfortable to bring my whole self to the classroom. And then as I explore this, I actually create the opportunities, like Tanya said, those activities to give students space to bring themselves in the classroom, besides the academic side. So that practice, like Tanya said, bring this artifact, and for me would be the building the learning communities and the everyday check-ins, how is everyone going? It was just a kind of routine check-in before, and afterwards, I just realized students actually shared their pictures in the discussion board activity. So I can feature one student at a time at the beginning of class and ask them to talk about their picture and themselves. It is a relatively large class I teach, so usually look back to Hester's beautifully put the slow teaching. Usually I really do not have the whole whole week class for everyone to speak for a larger class. But then I break down to this, how is everyone doing check-ins with featuring one student with their own story and picture they shared. And that immediately I feel the energy is different, even though it's a live online class in last fall. So I actually felt students' voice and the energy in the Zoom conversations has changed. So that made me think that not only it's a question for me to bring my whole self to the classroom, and I should provide this space and opportunity for students who are willing to do that with me, and therefore really complete this co-creation of this learning experience with my students.
You know what I think is so powerful in all of your responses is that we often think of the changes that we make related only to content, right? Like we're going to update the readings, we're going to update the content shared with the students. We want to make sure that the content reflects who our students are. And that is so important too. I'm not dismissing that at all. That is key in terms of a culturally responsive lens. But what you all keep talking about is more of the ways in which we as faculty and instructors also have to shift, right? The responsibility that we have in creating this classroom space with and for the students. And that's what I think is unique maybe about what all of you are sharing is it's, you really are highlighting the responsibilities that we also take on in rethinking our epistemologies, in rethinking our paradigms. And that is above and beyond the content piece. So thank you for addressing that as well. I think it's just, like I said, it's just super powerful. Tanya, I wanted to go back to you, and you talked a little bit about some of the pieces that went well, right, with the artifact sharing. I don't know if there's other elements across the course, across the experience that you want to talk about that went well. What would you still like to improve? And then what surprised you?
I think when we're on this journey, there's always room for improvement. And I think I kind of echo what Hester had said in the sense of, I've always been interested in cultural humility because it's a part of nursing. But when I saw cultural pedagogy, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Does this even exist? And so like Hester, it was like, this was something new because I wanted to bring something new to the classroom. I wanted something to be fulfilling for the students. And so I would say it's a constantly learning experience when it comes to this, not only for I think like you said, Judy, it's not only just a course, but this institute has basically changed my journey. So from the journey of the institute, I decided to do the accelerator program fellow so that I could, get skill set for service learning and civic engagement. And NAR and I are basically on the same journey. And we always joke about this because we kept on meeting each other in the same space, because we wanted to create these spaces for our students. And then after that, I went to a course that it was done by Masha, amazing, Intentional Learning Relationships, another amazing course that I would recommend anyone to do, especially if you're on this journey for servingness. It just really helps assist you with the skill set so that you can create these authentic spaces for our students. And so what surprised me most of all is how students want to be seen. They want, they're showing up and they're actually very vulnerable. And like Na even said, then we also as faculty have to be willing to be vulnerable or be willing to show up and be authentic. But I think most of all, the takeaway from this was the surprise was that students really, truly want to be authentic. They want to be seen. So that would be my addition to that, my surprise. Because I think sometimes we think students don't want to be seen in the sense of authentic, but they do.
And please, Na and Hester, jump in if there's anything else that you want to add to that particular question. I know Tanya mentioned Masha, Jameen, and the Office of Instruction and Assessment. And so I want to make sure that we acknowledge our collaborators in this work, because it certainly wasn't done solely by myself or solely within HSI initiatives and faculty affairs. We partnered with OIA, the Office of Instruction and Assessment, specifically with Masha as one of our kind of debrief kind of facilitators every day. She also led some of the sessions. Dr. Guada Lozano with the Center for University Education Scholarship similarly helped with a lot of the debriefing and the advising of content. And then Dr. Moira Osias in the Center for the Study of Higher Education similarly was there as a kind of debrief team lead every day. And they became kind of the advising team for me behind the scenes of what are we missing? What do we need to integrate? What do we need to do next year that maybe were some of our own gaps and holes? Because certainly it's a journey for us too, in figuring out the ways in which we're meeting the needs of our faculty to then meet the needs of our students. And so I want to make sure to give them all acknowledgement and shout outs for all the work that they put into this as well. Now I'm going to turn to you. What was the biggest takeaway? And then you've talked a lot about how you've applied this to other contexts, specifically even your promotion dossier. I don't know if you are comfortable sharing that piece.
Yes. Well, thank you, Judy. I think, yeah, like Tanya said, we have this shared interest, and then we keep looking, like bumping into each other in all these wonderful opportunities provided by UFA with different OI courses and other kind of program, experiential learning program. For me, I think it's a very similar journey that first of all, this institute just provided us so much and so rich materials. I would think there are just so many things on my note that this is probably something I will keep coming back for a long time. Before the semester, when I think about twist my classes, this is a set of tools and my notes to really basically provide me this culture responsive lenses. When I do any changes to my class, when I think any shifts or any redesign of in different modalities, so that's really powerful, like perspectives that really empowered by this institute, that I now have another lens to look at my course design and lesson planning, all this. But boil down to the takeaways. First one, Judy, I have to give a shout out to Judy's hard work, because she has been put together such a wonderful program and such an amazing list of speakers. I don't want to be omit for the speakers I didn't mention, but I do have speakers that really resonate with me. The first one being Dr. Valentina from the University of Denver. And in her talk with a lot of good, very hands-on practices, is actually the notion of small steps matter, that making small pivots can ignite big changes. And that really resonates with me going on this journey, because it reduced my anxiety to get everything right as soon as possible. Because the importance of the issue really pressed me make me realize, as I mentioned at the beginning, urge me to get things right for our students. But then that anxiety really built up, and then the small steps matter, that notion from Dr. Valentina really kind of make me rethink how I want to approach this and how I can take these small steps from the day after, from the fall semester, right after institute, and continue to this semester. An example that I have been approached my class as learning communities, and this institute is really empower me to make that explicit to students, and I also explain why. So I did in fall semester, I did a discussion board activity to ask students, what does it mean to be a learning community and how would you like to contribute? Basically, we established some class norms together. Now, given the online teaching reality, and I left it as a discussion board activity, I really didn't carve time. Go back to the small teaching notion that has approached. I didn't carve out the time that semester. This semester, we went to the in-person space, and I made myself the notes that for the first day of class, as much materials I already planned, I do want to carve out at least 20 to 30 minutes for the class to discuss this question about the learning community, to establish those classroom norms together. And we did that. And when the second class, I showed a list of behaviors that our class had put together that we should encourage and we should avoid. That is just so powerful to establish for the class. So that notion of small steps matter really resonates with me. It reduced my anxiety of getting things right away. Now, another takeaway related to what Judy was mentioning, Marsha from our OI office, she is amazing. And she was, I remember she was the first speaker to kick off our institute. And immediately her frame of student learning and domain of learning into think, do, and feel, that framing really kind of is an aha moment for me. Because I think, like many of us, when we think about teaching, we think about think. We want to equip students with the knowledge and the critical thinking, how they think, as well as those skills, how they do as professionals do. But the feel part, which is the effective domain of the learning, on top of this cognitive domain of learning, has been most of the time, it's not omitted intentionally. I know many of us do care about students' emotions and feelings in the classroom, but not important enough that we think our course design, we think our teaching in that domain enough. So that really resonated with me, and that's really pushed me to make my effort of building the learning community very explicit and mindful, intentional in my classroom. And that framework is what Judy was talking about. I adopted into my candidate statement to frame my teaching work in my promotion package. And I just so grateful to have that aha moment to kind of really rethinking of my teaching, and in a way that is very effective as well as impactful to our students. So that would be my takeaways. Now, I think Tanya already touched upon the kind of spillover effect. I call it from this institute to others. That we both, and along with other colleagues on campus, we kind of both went through this general education revamp class. And then we also engage in this experiential learning accelerator program, really kind of organized by our student engagement and career development office, that's really trying to push on this experiential learning and authentic learning with community partners, engaging community partners into the classroom and provide students these opportunities to do those authentic work. All this, like I said, when it just gave me that cultural perspectives whenever I do class changes. and to improve to my other courses. And as another piece is because this Servingness. So Judy has done so much that another program that she has led and also launched last year is this U of A faculty HSI seed grant. And because of the experience with Judy in the institute, I kind of connected with my colleague in my department, and we put together an application for this grant, basically couple what I've been doing in my class with my colleague, Professor Anna Josephson's work in the food insecurity. So we kind of put it together a research, also a teaching grant idea to kind of participate in this U of A HSI seed grant. And so all of this just feel like, even though they are different dots of my professional development, of my journey, but then it's really kind of come together with a notion of creating this inclusive and culturally responsive learning environment for our students.
No, thank you so much. There's so many connections that you've made to other parts of your work. And I love that you used Masha's framework in thinking about how you represent yourself in your teaching dossier. I mean, it's so important to make those connections between our own scholarship and practice and the work that we do with students. So thank you for that. You sparked another question for me that I want to pose to all three of you before we open it up to our audience. But I want to make sure for Tanya and Hester, is there anything else that you want to add to that particular conversation or question?
No, bravo. I think we all share the enthusiasm and gratefulness for your work and for the Institute, and highly recommend to take that time for yourself and exploration and really grasp the paradigm change, and don't get anxious, but the small steps that Na so well said. Even just thinking about it, and any small step is a huge step and can only be built on in further semesters.
And I would just like to add and echo everyone. It's more so like small steps, big rewards. Yeah. And it's making those small pivots of change. And like this institute is, like I said, and it's changed all of us. It's not just that one course, it's rippled effect. It's empowered me with some fellow colleagues of mine to go into producing this Gen Ed course. So, and it's because of the Institute. So if I'd never done the Institute, I would have never been inspired to take on such a big challenge. But the whole purpose of this course that we're inspiring to do is utilizing all the tools that I learned in this Institute.
This is great. I mean, the goal, hopefully, right, is to make sure that it's always connected to our Gen Ed curriculum in different ways. And so it's wonderful to hear that as well. But you all keep mentioning these small changes, small pivots. Dr. Valentina Iturbe-Legrave, who, as Na mentioned at the time, was at the University of Denver, is now with Google doing this work. That was her big takeaway, was you don't have to do all of it at once, right? You can make small pivots across multiple semesters that really add up to a meaningful shift for students and with ourselves. And so my last kind of question, you can each maybe pick a different piece, but if you had to recommend one small pivot to start with, what would your recommendation be? What would that one initial change or one initial pivot be?
I would just say one small thing, as actually do the Institute.
I didn't tell them to do this.
Do the Institute. There's also Masha's class, intentional learning relationships. They're just, do a course, because I've always told Judy and Masha, for me, these are all very nourishing, especially after these long semesters or hard semesters. I go to these spaces to be nourished, which would be interesting when you think, oh my gosh, another workshop. But for me, it's nourishment to the soul. and for my students.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, Tanya. For me, what I immediately came to my mind probably speaks more to the colleagues who teach in the classroom, who work with students, or I guess it's more of a culture thing in the workplace too, is the continuing and ongoing check-ins. So this small change, I have been doing it in my classroom, just checking, as I mentioned, how is everyone today. It's basically now is a slides to remind me to do that and share some pictures from my students to include everyone. But I want to kind of, again, highlight one of our wonderful speakers from the Institute is Dr. Z. Nicoloso. She actually put it beautifully and make me actually, I use her exact sentence on the slides to explain to my students. So she said that, yes, this ongoing continuing check-ins is not meant to solve or make better, but to surface, feel, and experience together as a learning community. At the beginning, I feel like my fear of starting this conversation is that, oh, what if someone said, okay, I'm not doing so well, and how do I really continue this conversation, the hard conversation? And then this notion of we feel and experience together as a learning community really resonates with me. And I tell my students, this is what we are going to do every time, every class session at the beginning of class. So we do this quick check-in. So for me, I feel like in the pandemic, I guess in the working place, that the small talks actually are meaningful check-ins that we check on each other as a community. So I guess that would be my immediate thought on this small things to start.
Very beautifully said, Na, and I would just echo that teaching and learning is like an onion with so many layers, and that you're not the only one in the classroom. It's not all on you, but that the peer experience, the person sitting next to me, connectiveness is central, and that you can build a community with the students, with preceptors, with TAs, that everybody's hungry for that connection and exchange, and that you build a class with so many layers that everybody feels held, I think is correct English, and welcomed, and that they can each time bring their authentic self, and also let you know that they are having a hard time and they need some space, which is also should absolutely be honored.
Thank you all so much. I have to tell you, the same ways that you have talked about shifts in paradigm and nourishment, and that just excitement of working with your students. It was such nourishment for me to work with all of you. So thank you for also building that and giving that to one another as part of the Institute. I'm so grateful to all of you. We have time. We have about 5-6 minutes for questions from our audience members. We're able to unmute you so you can engage in conversation. Is there anybody that would like to pose a question? I don't see any in the Q&A right now, but we certainly would like to welcome you into the space. I know, Caroline, I see the question. Yes, we'll have the recording up probably within a few weeks, and it'll be on our HSI initiatives website, and I can put that in the link in the chat as well so that you have it. But yes, we want you to share. We want this to be a resource for people. Other questions? Well, one thing as folks are thinking about questions that I've posed to every participant of our webinar series, and we talked a little bit about this in our prep meeting, and maybe I'll hold it because I see that Lisa raised her hand, and I'd rather get to Lisa first before I pose my last question around Servingness. Lisa, let's go ahead and unmute you so that you can ask your question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I did not mean to cut you off. I was more trying to just get my hand out there.
No,
happy you all speak. I think the thing that excites me as well, which I did not hear addressed today, is how is the university, and especially from this framework of being an HSI, how are we working to bring us together and have classes and service learning and immersion opportunities based on Servingness, where we're not just siloed in our own college.
I certainly have some responses, but I want to make sure that you all can answer too.
I think this question is at the institutional level, which I cannot comment on, which with my background. But from my personal experience, I totally understand that a silo feeling of really in your own field and in your own maybe unit or college. I guess I kind of initiated and made the effort for myself to attend institution like what Judy organized this institute and other workshops that afford me this opportunity to work and connect with colleagues across college, but we share similar interests, like Tanya said, like interest of student success. That's how me and Tanya keep meeting each other. And then finally, we set up the meeting for two of us to catch up, to really share ideas. So, and that's wonderful. That's very beautiful. And Tanya said it beautifully that it's nourishing for us. So that's my, I guess it's from the participants' standpoint.
Lisa, what an excellent question. I just want to add that it starts in the classroom, making connections and breaking out of silos. So I think it is that learning is integrated, that students come with a lot of knowledge to come from another class, it's biochem, algebra, or agriculture or nursing classes, and that you help them make the connection. It's not your little field in your classroom, but we are just a little puzzle piece in their whole mosaic of learning that they will take out in the big world. And it starts with us helping them make those connections and breaking out of the silo, right as a student.
I added, Lisa, a couple more links to other initiatives on campus where much of this is also integrated. So for example, I mentioned Dr. Guada Lozano and the Center for University Education Scholarship. In June, CUES hosted a workshop around mapping educational experiences across the classroom within service learning and civic engagement kind of context. And these same ideas were woven throughout. And so there is a connection. She and I have kind of written about the ways in which these two workshops and institutes, the rest of the work that CUES is doing really enhances this kind of servingness work. The other one I put in is the Cielo program, which is run through the Office of Diversity and Inclusion that Dan Sayapan oversees. You mentioned immersion programs. This is a cultural immersion program, short-term trips, primarily focusing on students from underserved backgrounds to go and experience cultural immersion and in shorter trips, because oftentimes what Dan has suggested and what we know from the literature is that some of our minoritized communities can't do long-term study abroad trips, and for various reasons, for financial reasons, for documentation reasons. And what Dan has created, similar to what Guada has created, infuses this cultural responsiveness and servingness throughout the program. So there's a couple. Certainly we can add more links and resources, but this is a great question that I hope we can keep adding resources together and share with each other. So please, others, put more examples in the chat if you would like to share. Dawn, please jump in.
Well, I had a question. Has anybody experienced pushback either in the classroom or otherwise from the changes that you made in your classes?
No, and it's my first answer, but it is tricky. It's an art, and to learn to create a welcoming at the beginning is of essence, and not everybody, because it's new and everybody comes from their own also difficult. We're pandemic, as Na has mentioned so many times. also unfamiliar with stepping in this, stepping out of your comfort zone. So thinking about how to facilitate warming up, going slow, and welcoming people on their own speed and time into this co-created space is very important. And there can be a lot more training, and you can make mistakes, or it works for one student and it's harder for the next. But just because they push back doesn't mean they don't want to. It's just that you have to slow down and take time and think or integrate that question, because they're part of the community and they're part of that voice. So it's a chance, it's an opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Don and Lisa, for your questions. I do want to kind of end with our last kind of big picture question that we posed to our panelists across the webinars. And you've alluded to this in different ways, but what would be the next steps that you all would recommend that we need to do as an institution to build capacity around HSI Servingness?
I would say to continue to have more initiatives like this so that faculty can participate and join in and learn the skill set, because that's what I did. So definitely more initiatives.
I think the universities should grow in their pride and recognition of the HSI designation and make it central to also promotion, as Na is doing, and to the importance that we're not just a research university, but you can only get to that higher level with this kind of teaching and make those co-equal. It's still a hierarchy. Teaching is still poo-pooed, or people don't dare to do it or take the time to invest because it's emotional investment. Also to reach out to that student, Don, as you said, that might, needs more help or needs enters the room in the space in a different energy, and that there's more institutional support. But I think the HSI is such an important designation and should be central to this university.
Yeah, I think following what Hester mentioned about the resource, the notion of small teaching that we all resonate with from beginning, it requires time and investment from the faculties. And especially we are talking about the maybe faculties have the privilege and opportunity to work with students directly in and outside the classroom. And those faculties, as I said, I learned to give my students space. I guess from institution standpoint, how do institutions give faculty space to invest their time, their already very scarce time, to the sense that is very impactful to our students?
Thank you all. I want to direct folks' attention to one more resource in the chat, and that is of our HSI Fellows program, which is another incredible, it's the signature program within our HSI initiatives that Dr. Marla Franco leads. The applications and call for those, the new cohort of fellows will come out again within the next few weeks. So everything is launching in the next few weeks. And that is another incredible space to bring together a cohort over an entire year of faculty and staff who really go deeper on these issues around what it means to be an HSI, and then commit to working on projects that move forward the efforts that we all have shared are so meaningful and important for our HSI designation in our institution and for our students. And so that link is also in the chat. I want to also make sure that you know that we, on February 17th, will be coming back for our next webinar at 1 p.m. with Dr. Sonia Colina, who is in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, and she oversees the National Center for Interpretation, and she'll be talking about Servingness through language access and inclusion, and we hope to see you all there. And then, of course, to give Monique Beltran a huge shout out. She is on as a panelist behind the scenes, helping to organize everything. Nothing in HSI initiatives could function without Monique, so we're so grateful for her, and so grateful for the three of you for not only going through the Institute and committing to this deep it's heart work, right? Heart work with our students, in partnership with our students. Thank you for doing this. I know how much it is making an impact on the students that we serve. And so thank you for being part of it. Thank you for being part of our panel today. Yeah, thank you all. And
Thank
we'll be
you.
sure. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Judy, for running all of this and keep us organized, everything.
Thank you, Judy, getting us all together.
Yeah, thank you so much, Judy. Another nourishing experience.
Oh, good. For me too. I'm leaving with such a energy high. So thank you all. And we'll go ahead and end it. We'll send you the link once it's finished. And Monique and I will send you all the wonderful comments in the chat. I don't know if you're able to follow them throughout. So have a wonderful afternoon. We'll see you all later.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.